All right, so this is going to be part two. I'm going to go over the body setup. Before I did anything, I made sure I saved a separate file, and this is going to be the first rig file. I recommend saving after every major thing that you do. So, first thing, we want to import a biped. Comes in really small. Grab the bottom circle, scale it up. So what I'm looking for when I scale it up is I just want the root to be about in the middle of the pelvis. Since this is the main joint where all the other joints fan out from, that's the one you really want to be in the correct position. You don't want to be moving that around. And then from there, you can start with the torso or the leg. I just usually start with the leg. One thing that can be really, really useful, select your object, turn on live surface, and then say snap to projected center. So this can make it really, really make your life a lot easier when you have to check every single angle to make sure that it's not poking out somewhere where it looks all right from this angle, and then you change this angle. All right, when you're doing both the leg and the arm, you'll have these pole vector arrows that you want them to be facing forward, and the way you get that is by having the joint perfectly straight in the front. On the side, you want a little bit of bend in the knee. Let me turn on the pole vector. So you can see on the elbow and on the knee, when the rig is complete, there'll be a locator out here, and that'll allow you to twist the leg from the knee. But from a starting position, you want it to be straight out. If I move the knee like this and then re-click the pole vector, you can see that now it's going to be pointing out to the side. So do your best. Even though my legs are not perfectly straight, so the joints aren't necessarily going to be right in the middle. You still do want a slight bend. And even though this isn't directly in the middle, it's close enough, and you can fix a lot of that with how you paint your weights. For the foot, I usually put that right around the ball of the heel, or the ball of the ankle rather. You want to think about the bone landmarks and where and how the joints bend when you're placing these. That looks good. Oops. For the heel, you want this on the ground plane. And right about here. So kind of matching up with the bottom of the foot. And if you could imagine a right triangle coming down. Same with the pinky toe and big toe. For the toes, you can kind of see how the pinky toe and the big toe are further down than the toes end, and the toes are a little bit higher up. So you want those floating in about the projected center of the toes. And the toes are important, but they're not as important. I mean, unless your rig is all about modeling the feet, and then in that case you might want to actually rig individual toes, and you can add extra limbs and extra joints here, but I think for the purposes, I mean, every rig that I've ever worked with really only needed a single joint. for the feet, for the toes to bend. Here, I'm going to line this up just on the outer edge. This one, just on the outer edge. And this is kind of just like marking off like where this, you can think of the toes as like one object and they're going to curl or be able to bend. This ends just about here. All right, and that takes care of the leg. Next I'll take care of the torso. So usually push this one forward. Make sure these stay right in the center. You know, don't go changing these around. Snap to projected center will help you a little bit, but you want them to be perfectly symmetrical. So only mess with them on these two axes. Let's go up a little bit. Chest can go up. A little bit more here. This can go up a little higher. The clavicle, I guess, should be this area back here, and I've experimented a little bit with putting it further down in pack, but for me, I think it works best a little higher up, and a little bit farther out from where the neck is, and it kind of affects the traps. So like the shoulder joint affects this mass here, and when you deform your arm upward, you can use these, or the clavicle controller, to fix the where the deformation pinches in on itself. That should be good. Shoulder, probably a little higher here. And then now I'll actually rotate, because again, I want this to remain perfectly straight. So you kind of got to just do your best lining it up. Does not need to remain straight on this axis, and again you want a bend there so that this is pointing directly out. This could go down a little bit. Oops. That looks about right. Now for the hand joint, you don't want to place this in the middle. You want to place this right above the meat of the thumb in the center of the wrist. You can rotate this one as well a little bit. Because when you look where your hand bends, it actually bends a little bit higher up. Again, it helps to picture where the bones are. All right. This first thumb joint is actually controlling like the meat of the thumb. So you want this about here. Oops. Should be good. and it helps to rotate a little bit. Just to get them lined up a little bit better. Let me actually take these down to 0.1. You can change your joint size, and this will actually give a little bit more accurate, especially when you're working with smaller areas like the fingers. This second joint should be right about where the thumb breaks off from the palm. Actually, this should be a little bit further back. Oops. This should be, this is like the main knuckle of the thumb. Try to line it up with where it bends. And if you look, if I turn on wireframe, you can see I have these like 3 tight polys here. You can see where the deforming poly loop is. You kind of want to match that up as best you can. And then this just marks the end of the thumb. I'm going to do that with the rest of the fingers. This is the cup, or if you're making a cup with your hands, it kind of bends the, I believe, the metacarpals, the tiny bones in the palm. And you want this just about in the center, on the back half of your hand. I don't really use the cup function a lot. The first joint for the fingers, you really want to put where the knuckle is. If you look where your fingers begin to bend, they don't start at the edge here. They start a little bit back in the palm where the knuckle is. So just a little bit more realistic deformation. Oops. And then I'll rotate that top joint to try to line it up a little bit better. So you can make your fingers perfectly straight when you model them, but they'll be easier to rig, but they'll look a little bit more awkward. So it's kind of a give and take with, you know, do you want to make your fingers like robot fingers, or if you make them a little bit more natural with a little bit of bend to them, they'll look a little bit better, but they will be, you'll have to go through this extra work. Let me rotate this. That looks good. Let me rotate this. All right, that takes care of the hand. Moving on to the neck. This is about the right area. Now, for the head, you want this just above the jaw or around the jawline. This is kind of where the head rotates and pivots. Now, a lot of this is going to be undone and gone over with the face setup. So it's not super important. If you're not doing the face setup, then yes, you want to get this right. But I'll just do it really quickly just to show you. This one you want at the end of the chin. This you want it to line up with the eye. And you can really get this done well by turning on wireframe, turning on X-ray, and really going in there and making sure it matches up well. And you can do the same thing with the side view. So what you would do once you have it rigged, you would parent the eyeballs to this joint. But the face setup does a really, really good job, and it gives you like the sticky eyelid moves with the deformation of the eye. It looks a lot more realistic. And then let me turn off the hair. This last joint you just want to sit at the top of the head. I think that's it. Just go over, double check your work, make sure everything looks right. All right. Let's turn this off. Now, before you build your rig, I recommend just saving this out. And I'll save this as rig, mail02, rig02. And that way you can always come back, edit your fit skeleton. There's tools within here. You can toggle fit mode or build mode, but sometimes I've been a little bit buggy on my end, in my experience. And I think it's better just to go back and edit the fit skeleton before you build anything. So let's build the advanced skeleton and see what it looks like. There you go. It does a really good job. Very quickly. If you go through these opening steps and do everything right, it will give you a really nice rig and a lot faster time than it would to build everything manually. All right, and that is where we'll stop for this part. The next part, I'll tackle. All right, so now that the fit skeleton is built, what we're going to do is go through our deforming options. I just use the skin cage. There's a lot of different options here for how to skin your mesh to your rig. The skin cage just builds like a proxy mesh and then copies those weights to your high poly mesh. And you can mess around with this. I really don't. I think that it ends up not being worth the time it takes to put into it, and it usually just gives you pretty good results. You can use these adjustments like deformation width. You can add wrist details, create the groin locators, and then adjust groin area. This just angles them down, gives a little bit cleaner deformation or a little bit more natural deformation. But ultimately, it's going to give you decent weights to start with, but you can finesse them, but ultimately you're going to have to go back at the end of this whole process and go in and manually fix the weights if you want to get it really good. Also considering, you know, you don't want to put too much work on this, because if the face setup doesn't work right or parts don't deform correctly and you want to go back to your fit mode, you want to get through the entire rig before you spend all this time, you know, getting in and really fine-tuning those weights. So for now, just select the mesh. Make sure you're selecting the mesh and not the group. Hit copy weights. And then delete the skin cage. I'm just going to switch this to IK to test it out. Pretty good, but you can see a lot of this underarm is coming along for the ride there. And that's just very typical in rigs. This is usually the problem area. But it looks like it's working pretty well. So that's where we'll stop off with the body phase, and then the next part I'll do the face setup. And hopefully it will go smoothly. It is probably the most complex phase of the whole thing. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next part.